Hey there, it's me again, Michelle, and welcome back to my Canadian History channel. Today's episode is about Bytown, the little town at the head of the Rideau Canal that would later become Ottawa, our nation's capital. Okay, first let's start off with the basic history of Bytown before getting into some of the interesting specifics. Firstly, Bytown is the former name of Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. It was founded on September 26, 1826, and incorporated as a town on January 1, 1850. It was then superseded by the incorporation of the city of Ottawa on January 1, 1855. Later again, Ottawa was officially designated as the capital of the province of Canada in 1866 and has been our country's capital ever since. Now basically, Bytown came about as a result of the construction of the Rideau Canal and then grew largely due to the Ottawa River timber trade. The town of Bytown was located where the Rideau Canal meets the Ottawa River and consisted of two main parts centered around the canal, Upper Town and Lower Town. Upper Town, located to the west of the canal, was situated in the area of the current downtown and Parliament Hill. Lower Town was on the east side of the canal where today's Byward Market and the general area of Lower Town are. The two areas of town were connected over the Rideau Canal by the Sappers Bridge, constructed in 1827. The town took its name from John By, who, as Lieutenant Colonel in the British Royal Engineers, was instrumental in the construction of the canal. Colonel By laid out the streets of Bytown in a pattern that mostly exists today. Wellington Street, Rideau Street, Sussex and Spark Street were some of the earliest streets in use, and Sappers Bridge crossed over the canal and connected Spark Street to Rideau Street at that time. Nicholas Sparks owned Bytown's land west of the canal, except for the lands north of Wellington, which were considered ordnance lands. The area east of Bank Street to the canal was acquired by the military and not used for houses for about 2 decades, after which it was returned to Nicholas Sparks. The Ottawa River timber trade spurred the growth of Bytown and saw an influx of immigrants and later entrepreneurs hoping to profit from the squared timber that would be floated down the Ottawa River to Quebec. Bytown had seen some trouble in the early days, first with the Shiners' War in 1835 to 1845 and the Stony Monday Riot in 1849. Some early buildings that still stand today have been erected in Bytown. In 1826, Thomas Mackay was contracted to build the Commissariat Building, now the Bytown Museum. Mackay also built Rideau Hall and parts of the Union Bridge connecting LeBreton Flats to Hull. Notre Dame Cathedral Basilica was also built early on in the developing town, and the University of Ottawa had its 1846 origins as a college, and it received its present location in 1856. Though administration of Bytown had been conducted by civil authorities since 1828, the town did not become incorporated until much later. The Ordnance Department had held lands in the town's core, dividing Upper Town from Lower Town, lands which had been the property of Nicholas Sparks. These lands were considered by many to be blocking economic progress, as well as being held for speculative reasons only. When Ordnance eventually returned the lands to Nicholas Sparks through the Vesting Act, the major obstacle to incorporation was removed. Bytown was originally incorporated on July 28, 1847, and sanctioned by both the Legislative Assembly and the Governor, but eventually this was disallowed by the Queen, possibly due to the perceived threat to ordnance. An act of the Legislative Assembly further facilitated the incorporation of municipalities, and on January 1, 1850, Bytown was incorporated. Well, that's it for the general history of Bytown. Now let's look at a few interesting specifics. Like, what started the need for a settlement in this region? Well, it all started with the building of the Rideau Canal. The Rideau Canal is a 202-kilometer-long canal that links the Ottawa River at Ottawa with the St. Lawrence River at Kingston, Ontario, Canada. And why was the canal needed? Well, after the War of 1812, information was received about the United States' plans to invade the British colony of Upper Canada from upstate New York by following the St. Lawrence River. This would have severed the lifeline between Montreal and the major naval base at Kingston. To protect against such an attack in the future, the British began construction and reinforcement of a number of defenses, including the Citadel Hill in Halifax, La Citadelle in Quebec City, and Fort Henry in Kingston. And to ensure safe passage between Montreal and Kingston, a new route was planned that would proceed westward from Montreal along the St. Lawrence, north along the Ottawa River to the mouth of the Rideau River, then southwest via a canal to Kingston out into Lake Ontario. The construction of this canal was supervised by Lieutenant Colonel John By of the Royal Engineers. Private contractors such as future sugar refining entrepreneur John Redpath, Thomas Mackay, Robert Drummond, Thomas Phillips, Andrew White, and many others were responsible for much of the construction, and the majority of the actual work was done by thousands of Irish, Scottish, and French-Canadian labourers. The canal work started in the fall of 1826 and was completed by the spring of 1832. Well, after the canal was built, the already existing timber trade really took off. The Ottawa River timber trade was the 19th century production of wood products by Canada on areas of the Ottawa River and the regions of the Ottawa Valley in western Quebec, destined for British and American markets. It was a major industry of the historical colonies of Upper Canada and Lower Canada, and it created an entrepreneur known as the lumber baron. The trade in squared timber and later sawed lumber led to the population growth and prosperity to communities in the Ottawa Valley, especially the town of Bytown. But all wasn't roses for Bytown. A rough time for the town was the Shiners' War from 1835 to 1846. The Shiners' War were violent outbreaks in Bytown between Irish Catholic immigrants led by Peter Allen and French Canadians led by Joseph Montferrand. The war began when Allen, a major Irish timber operator, organized a group of Irishmen to attack other timber operations. This group of Irishmen were known as the Shiners. The Shiners attacked French-Canadian timber rafts and the town's political institutions, as well as brawling with French Canadians in the streets. In an attempt to control the violence, the citizens of Bytown created the Association of the Preservation of the Public Peace in Bytown, which included armed patrols. However, the violence continued. In the spring of 1837, the violence was brought under control after the government deployed troops to arrest the Shiners. Occasional violence still occurred until 1845 by groups claiming to still be the Shiners. Then there was the Stony Monday riot. The Stony Monday riot took place in Bytown on Monday, September the 17th, 1849. In 1849, the Canadian Parliament, which was still moving around, was located at Montreal. The Rebellion Losses Bill was enacted into law by Lord Elgin, then Governor General, in April of 1849, compensating Lower Canadians for losses suffered during the rebellions of 1837 to 38. The bill was unpopular with Loyalists, known as Tories, because it compensated those who had participated in the rebellion. In the riots that ensued in Montreal, Lord Elgin was assaulted and the Montreal Parliament buildings were burned. Lord Elgin then let it be known that he was considering relocating the nation's capital and scheduled a visit to Bytown. Tory supporters opposed organizing a reception for Lord Elgin and had a meeting to plan for the visit organized by reformists in the North Ward Market, now the Byward Market area. The two opposing sides clashed, first with sticks and stones, but later with firearms. 30 people were wounded and one man, David Borthwick, was shot and died. 2 days later, the two political factions, armed with cannons, muskets, and pistols, faced off on the Sappers Bridge over the Rideau Canal, but the military arrived in time to defuse the situation. And the hardships continued. Amazingly, much of Hull and large portions of Ottawa were burned to the ground by the Hull-Ottawa Fire of 1900. Around 10 a.m. on April 26, 1900, a defective chimney on a house in Hull caught fire, which quickly spread between the wooden houses due to windy conditions. Within 2 hours, the blaze had destroyed several surrounding blocks. At that point, it began to spread along the river, where there were large lumber companies on the banks and islands and huge amounts of stacked lumber that quickly ignited. By 1 p.m., the fire jumped the river on embers and set the Ottawa side ablaze. 2/3 of Hull was destroyed, including 40% of its residential buildings and most of its largest employers along the waterfront. And when the fire spread across the Ottawa River, it destroyed a large swath of western Ottawa, from the Le Breton Flats south to Dow's Lake. About 1/5 of Ottawa was destroyed, with almost everything in the band between Booth Street and the rail line leveled. Much of the city's industry was destroyed, including 2 major ironworks, 2 flour mills, and both the Ottawa Electric Railway and Electric Lighting Company. But that wasn't the only fire. We also had a major fire in our Parliament buildings. A fire alarm was raised in the Centre Block on February 3rd, 1916 at 8:37 p.m. Something had been seen smoldering in a wastepaper basket in the reading room. The fire then progressed beyond control in the wood-paneled and paper-filled room. Some women in the gallery, unaware of the urgency, attempted to reclaim their fur coats from the coat rack and perished. Others, meanwhile, formed a human chain to carry furniture, files, and artwork out of the burning structure. The portrait of Queen Victoria in the Commons Chamber was rescued from flames for the second time after having already been saved from the 1849 burning of the Parliament buildings in Montreal. Half an hour after the fire started came the first of 5 explosions, and shortly after midnight, the large bell in the Victoria Tower crashed to the ground. When the fire crews thought that the inferno had been quelled, flames emerged in the Senate chamber. Within 12 hours, the building was completely destroyed, except for the Library of Parliament, spared by the closing of its heavy metal doors. Bowman Brown Law was the only member of Parliament who died in that fire. Well, that's it for the short but amazing story of Canada's capital city. Please stay tuned for the next surprise episode, because I'm not done talking yet. Now remember, at any time, feel free to leave comments or questions below, and I'll do my best to respond to them all. And please, be a true Canadian and be polite. And if you like this content, give this video a thumbs up. And click that subscribe button below to see more. And remember, if you wish, hit that bell if you'd like to be notified of any new content. Thanks everyone, and have a great day.